Bonsoir. This is the only word I will say in French. And unfortunately, I do not speak Italian, so I will speak in English. So it is in English that I would like to thank the President of the Academy and Professor Fazzolo and those who have given me the chance to try to tell you a few ideas, results concerning our work. I will have too many slides. They will be a bit complex, but that is what the brain is. But I will try to make the verb at least simplex. And the concept of simplexity, as I would like to propose to you, is the fact that evolution has found simplifying principles allowing living organisms in a complex world to perform tasks like predator, avoidance, rapidly and efficiently, and save computational resources. These simplifying principles are not trivial, and I call them simplex. And we have discovered in living organisms, when we do physiology, that actually these principles are very numerous. And this is what I like to share with you. So it is a particular way to look at the results and discoveries and understanding we have of living organisms, and also maybe a way to discuss with engineers making artificial machines inspired by these simplifying principles. So this is the general idea of the talk. We see many of these principles: multiple reference frame, anticipation, inhibition, redundance, biomechanics, internal models, synergies, laws of motions, vicariousness. Now, the Nature, the journal, has been interested by the translation of this book, and it said that the concept involves transforming a rich combination of simple rules into a model of reality that aids action and decision-making, yet respects complexity. So it is the idea that we should not be completely overwhelmed by complexity, and as you know, there are many théories de la complexité, but at the same time we have to recognize that solutions found by living organisms at all levels, from molecular to cognition, obey certain rules. Now, this term simplexity has been used before by geologists who are faced with the same problem of the complexity of the geological world, by mathematics. You know, mathematicians here know that there is such a creature as a simplex, engineering, design, and you can also buy a washing machine simplex today. So even le commerce a trouvé moyen d'absorber les concepts. Now, my point concerns living organisms. And I would like to speak, therefore, about simplexity in the brain and just share with you in 1 hour about some examples related to perception, action, memory, and particularly the problem of space. Let's talk a little bit about perception. To perceive the complex world is extremely difficult. How does our brain integrate all the information given by the senses about the world when we act or plan act? Now, the problem is that the brain does not take sensory information. Evolution has found a trick, and the trick is to project on the world hypotheses. The brain projects its rules upon the world. If you look at these two creatures, you perceive them as having not the same size. But if you go on the screen and measure, they have exactly the same size on the screen. It is because of the geometrical context that your brain decides that they do not have the same size. Projection. Same here. The psychologists many years ago have built this room, which is trapezoidal, with a roof which is going down. And if you look inside this room from a little hole from outside, this is what you perceive. You perceive the room as cubic. And two little girls which have the same size are perceived as different. Because the brain likes symmetry. The brain imposes on the world a rule of rigidity, symmetry, etc. That is a simplex principle. Of course, it allows the brain to go faster and interpret the world in an easier manner. But at the same time, of course, it leads to errors. So there is a trade-off between simplifying and making errors. We also know that the brain measures pertinent variables. If I send to you this object and you want to avoid it, you could do geometry. You could measure the distance in centimeters or meters. This is not the way. Too long. What David Lee in Scotland a number of years ago has proposed the tau theory. He has said if an object comes to you, the brain can easily evaluate the surface of the object and the rate of dilation. And if you make the ratio between the rate of dilation and the surface, which is easy to do with a little neuronal network, you get directly time to contact. And therefore the brain does not measure distance, it measures a pertinent variable, time to contact. And this is what also the gannet, the bird which falls on the fish, he has to take his wings in so that he doesn't break the wings. He is not going to do computation. He may also use this principle. So that is one other example of simplexity, which is to make a detour, in a sense, to choose a pertinent variable, and that is what von Uexküll, many years ago, proposed, that we all have what he called an Umwelt. That is, we all living organisms live with specific ways to ask questions to the world which correspond to their own living needs. Like the tick, la pauvre tique. The only thing the tick, the little beast there, qui donne les encéphalites, je crois. The tick, the only thing she knows about the world is butyric acid and heat. When she feels butyric acid and heat, she falls on the beast, eats the blood and dies. That is her Umwelt. We are a bit better. But still, we choose in the world living pertinent variables. The human brain has acquired this capacity to actually, as I will mention very shortly, get out of our Umwelt and imagine creative ideas. We also found this choice of pertinent variables in senses. And because I am a specialist of the vestibular system, you have to hear about the vestibular system, I'm sorry. The strange thing is that in books, in museums, everywhere, people still speak about the 5 senses. They forget about the vestibular sense. They forget about proprioception. So we have more than 5 senses. In addition to the 5 classical senses, we have this organ in the ear, which is 3 semicircular canals, which measure angular acceleration of the head in 3 planes, which correspond to the Euclidean planes, and 2 otoliths, which measure linear accelerations. And in addition to measuring linear accelerations, when we tilt the head, these can detect a particular acceleration, which is the acceleration of gravity, the component of gravity in their plane, so they are tilt meters. detecting our orientation in the world. And it is interesting to see that evolution has dissociated rotations and translations, which are also mathematical, basic Euclidean geometry concepts. So we find this dissociation in rotations and translation already provided by nature. In fact, the situation, nature and evolution has been even more elegant. Recently, with a French mathematician, Daniel Benquin, he's a real pure mathematician, we've been working together, and we have actually produced recently a paper. You see, this is recent. This is the utriculus, the otolith. It's like this, measuring translation. This is the sacculus, which is here, measuring vertical acceleration. They have strange geometries. Look, very strange, twisted. Nobody understood why these linear accelerators, like in engineering, you would build these simple vertical or horizontal accelerators, why they have this twisted thing, and why they have this striola, which is this border here, where all the neurons which detect acceleration are. And we have now produced a theory together by which, in fact, nature has been very, very economical. The real sensor is a ball with a virtual, like a tennis ball. You know, on a tennis ball, there is in couture. Actually, these two receptors are part of a real virtual sensor which detects very elegantly acceleration in all aspects. So complexity is also the fact that evolution has managed to simplify the materialization of the senses, keeping the complexity and elegance of these senses. So there are many mysteries like that that we can look at. And this is interesting. It's interesting because in evolution, I have discovered, I did not know, but in the French Academy of Science, our colleague Philippe Taquet, who was a specialist of dinosaurs, made a talk in which he reminded us that birds come from dinosaurs. And the current theories is that a dinosaur can become a bird because it gets wings. And I have proposed to my friends in the Museum d'Histoire Naturelle that what has happened, in fact, is that in addition to having wings, the dinosaurs, some dinosaurs have developed a very special vestibular system which allows them to do inertial guidance in flight. And we have now completed a very, very difficult series of experiments in which a young man even had to go to the synchrotron. And we have now shown that there is this evolution of this system to give it, in the bird, this ability to allow us to free from the ground and fly, like a missile. And you will see in a moment that this is also important for humanoid robots. So evolution has found ways, you see, to make things both simple and complex to allow us to increase performance. And we have now ways to do that. But there are other tricks. Eye muscles, eyeballs. Eyeballs are spheres. When we look somewhere, when you look at here and make eye movements, 1, 2, 3, 4, you rotate the eyeballs. Now, in mathematics, there is a problem which is called the non-commutativity of rotations. So if I start looking here, and I go up, 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 and back, or if I go up, 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 and to the same point, my eyes would be with one path like this and the other path like this. It wouldn't work. So evolution has found a way to solve this very difficult problem. All the axes of rotations of the eyes are in the frontal plane. And we don't know where this, what is called the listings law, is implemented. And it's probably, some people have said it is quaternions in a colliculus, etc. But there are also biomechanical tricks in the eye muscle gland. So the main idea here is that nature has found this solution, which is not trivial, not complex, to solve a very difficult problem. This is what I call, I submit to you, simplexity. And also we know that the 6 eye muscles of the eye are in the planes of the semicircular canals, which of course allows to make it easier to make the relation between the vestibular system and the eye muscles for vestibulo-ocular reflex, which stabilizes the eye in the orbit. And we are trying to convince our friends in robotics to do that, to see spatial filtering, to simplify and reduce computation. Evolution, animals to survive during evolution do not have time for complex computation. Now, vicariousness. Vicariousness is one of the principles of simplexity. It is a very well-known principle in education, in paleontology, in many areas. In living organism, we find it. It is the capacity to replace a system by another, le vicaire, in order to substitute, to have many strategies for a given performance. We can do things in different ways. And for instance, as an example, the ability to replace a system by another, for instance, the cooperation between the visual system and the vestibular system for stabilizing the visual world on the retina is not a simple problem, in spite of this geometrical correspondence. There are many other very complex, difficult things to be done. But evolution has found a way, because if I look at a place, I can stabilize my eye in many planes. Now, what happens if we create a conflict? If I buy, for instance, these progressive glasses, if I put these glasses on for the first time, and I turn my head here, the visual world goes quicker than what my vestibular system says. There is a conflict. If I put on the eye Dove prisms are these prisms which reverse the apparent movement of the visual world. So that if I turn my head to the left, the visual world, instead of going to the... if I turn my head to the right, the visual world, instead of going to the left, you can try, no? Visual world goes to the left. With this prism, the visual world goes in the same direction of the head at twice velocity. So all this machinery is completely killed, non-functional. And my colleague Melville Jones had found that after 6 weeks, the brain can plastically reverse the VOR. We have found in Paris, with the help of a student, Annick Béguet, who accepted to wear the prisms, she lost her boyfriend. In the meanwhile, because he probably could not stand it, she had to wear these prisms for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So something happened. I don't know. So Annick accepted that. But what we found is actually in 1 second, the brain can solve the problem. You see, if you turn your eye and head like this, first, generally, the eye goes. Then, as you can see here, the head goes. So this is eye movement, horizontal eye movement. This is head movement. So first, the eye goes saccade, then the head goes. That is the reflex with a gain of 1. You see, this is symmetrical. But then the subject loses the target because of the prism. And you see that after a few hesitations, after 1 second, look, 0.5 seconds, after 1 second, the brain has produced a movement which is adapted. And what we have proposed and found and published is that actually within 1 second the brain inhibits the reflexes and replaces the reflexes by a combination of saccades and pursuit, vicariousness. Very important also for rehabilitation, because it shows that the brain, that eventually if a system is non-functional or lesioned, the remediation, not rehabilitation, I will speak about that more tomorrow for children. Remediation consists in allowing the brain to reconstruct the same function with other elements of the mechanisms. All right? Vicariousness. This is simplex. This is not simple, it's not complex, but it's very elegant. Now, another example of the use of the cooperation between vision and vestibular system for the creation of a mobile reference frame during locomotion. Locomotion is very complex. Locomotion is a hierarchical system. There are pattern generators in the spinal cord, initiation in the mesencephalic reticular formation, repertoire of types, which are generally organized with basic ganglia, integration with posture and emotion, integration with global mental movement, navigation in hippocampus. Our friends in Munich have now shown beautiful activity in hippocampus during locomotion. Decision making, to walk is to go somewhere. It's not only to walk on a treadmill, it's to generate locomotor trajectories, it's making decision. So locomotion is a very complex mechanism. And organizing the body is many degrees of freedom. There are biomechanicians here, engineers. We have hundreds of muscles to coordinate. So how is this organized? Most humanoid robots in Japan and in France now, they control locomotion from the feet up, so-called zero moment point for technicians. The result is that the humanoid robots walk like that. This is how children walk. Small children walk like that. They walk taking the ground as a reference. But about 3 years of age, a revolution, Galilean revolution occurs. Instead of controlling locomotion bottom up, the brain starts, because of the development of a number of structures, to control the locomotion top down by the creation of an inertial guidance platform. If you look at this picture from the photograph Muybridge, that I put all these pictures together, you see that during running, the head is perfectly stabilized in rotation. I do not run like this. I run like this. Or I run like this. See, I'm a specialist of movement, so I have to move. I mean, otherwise, it's not physiology and it's not movement, right? So even in the Accademia, I suppose we are allowed to move. So it's very important. Suddenly, there is a revolution. The coordination of the hundreds of degrees of freedom is now made top-down from an inertial guidance platform, and this is the same as what happened in space. When our colleagues are making this complex machinery, they put on top, in space, on top they put an inertial guidance system, a little camera, which relates this system to a star for zeroing the accelerometers, etc. And the whole is guided by this system. We have the same. So, and you can see what happens in many conditions, walking up a stair, running. During salto, there is this up phase with the head stabilized, hopping, running. So, this is also related to the mathematics, because there are mathematicians here of Élie Cartan, and I am now working with Duncan and Tamar Flash in Weizmann Institute on the problem, because this is what Élie Cartan, the mathematician, has studied as mobile reference frame theory, which I don't understand. I work with this mathematician, but I would like to say that, of course, I do not understand the mathematics. They are very They are very complex, but we work together on these problems. Another interesting thing that evolution has found is the problem of anchoring this inertial guidance platform. And the anchoring is made by gaze. Gaze is not vision. Gaze is the projection of the optical axis in space. So I will project here, or I will project here. This is what roboticians also do when they use actually anchoring, les amers en robotique. And actually we do the same. So that is a collaboration between gaze and the vestibular system for creating this inertial platform which allows us to free from the ground and start jumping. And this is what has happened probably in dinosaurs when they started going to fly. Because they could not have the reference on the ground, they had to have this mobile reference frame, which is what we are now showing. And what is even more beautiful, I think, is that actually evolution has even modified the skeletal geometry in order to create, in addition to the stabilized plane, a privileged horizontal plane. If I ask you to draw a cat, you would probably draw the head, the cat. This is not how the cat is. This is a cat. Look how beautiful is the spinal cord of this cat. This geometry of the spinal cord, the biomechanics here, is made so as to create this privileged plane with the horizontal semicircular canal here and all the machinery for detecting vertical acceleration. And not many people today have actually re-examined this problem of skeleton. Skeleton is supposed to be something for anatomists. Whether actually, I believe that evolution has used the skeleton in order to also solve many geometrical problems, and we are now working with roboticians to try to simulate. And that is an example. We now are working in Paris with Aldebaran on this little robot now, which was very primitive. As you see, he has no neck. The inertial guidance platform is here, in the belly, here. So we have actually now designed the inertial guidance platform on the top, and we are now making necks, and we are now working on bigger humanoid, and also we are working in Japan with Professor Takanishi, Sensei, and many robotics specialists. And that is interesting. So, because it's interesting to work with robotics people by cross-fertilization. And I've been working with Professor Paolo Dario in Pisa for now many years, not on the idea of imposing to robots living principles, maybe they are better, maybe not, but also using the theories and the models of our friends roboticians for understanding the brain. Because on a computer, you can model whatever you want. But if you really want to have the robot work, then you have physics and many problems. So we find that this neuro-robotics cross-fertilization is actually extremely interesting for us. And we have many collaborations. Now, another example of these simplifying principles. Ça va? It's okay? Laws of natural movement. If I do this with my hand, you perceive this movement eventually as of constant velocity. It is not. Our friends from Italy, actually, Terziolo was my master in Minneapolis. I went to work with him. And Francesco Laconiti, who is in Rome now, my friend also, Paolo Viviani, who worked in my lab for many years. As you can see, my link with the Italian physiologist is a very long time. Now, what they showed is that when you do a movement with the arm, there is a very tight relation between tangential velocity, which is the velocity along the curve, and curvature. And you can see here, tangential velocity and radius of curvature, a very, in log coordinates, very tight relation. between the kinematics and the geometry. Where does this very tight law, which is true for all natural movements, come from? There are many discussions, I have no time to go into it. Minimum of energy, minimum jerk. I will give one interpretation in a moment. What we have shown in Paris, in my lab, is that this law also applies for locomotion. If I do an ellipse here, I have been quicker where curvature was smaller and slower. So we have shown that the same law applies for locomotion. In physiology, this was called many years ago le principe d'équivalence motrice, the principle of motor equivalence. The fact that I can draw a letter A with the finger, with the arm, or running on a beach, which suggests that the brain has common mechanisms to generate forms with different mechanical systems. And the problem for us is to understand what are these general laws and principles in our brain which allows these extremely general laws of natural movement. And we've been working on it. We have, for instance, shown in a cooperation with, actually, as you see, robotics labs in Toulouse, Jean-Paul Lemont. We have asked subjects to start from one place and go through a goal with a particular direction, like if I would walk here and back. Okay? The question here is, if I start here and if I want to go through here, what will be my trajectory? Theoretically, you can go in many ways. But in fact, what we have observed is that this is not the way people do. The way people do is this. Very stereotyped geometry. Once more, suggesting basic, simplifying optimization laws, as engineers would call it. Optimization principles, which would subserve the creation of these geometry. And we have since made a number of models for that. Everybody is fighting about these different kinds of laws. And once more, we've been back to reading literature, and particularly Poincaré. And Poincaré has said very interesting things. Basically, what he said is that the basis of geometry is in movement. He said, to imagine a point in space is to imagine the movement you would do. And Einstein actually said Poincaré is right. The experimental basis of geometry has been forgotten. And there are some very interesting papers, I have no time to go into this, of Poincaré, saying that there is no a priori space, but exploitation of the set of transformations by groups, which are based on sensations, etc., etc. And he said that, of course, the Euclidean geometry is maybe the plus commode, the easiest, but maybe, he said, not the true one. And yes, it may be, but we have been looking at that together with our colleagues in Israel, and we have asked the subjects to do either drawing with the hand or drawing with locomotion. So, same shape, with hand or walking. And what we have found and published now, you see this is recent too, mathematician, physiologist, very interdisciplinary. We have now shown that in order to model correctly these different shapes made by drawing or locomotion, one has to combine at least 3 geometries. Euclidean, affine, and equiaffine. And there are many reasons for that. Don't ask me about the details of the mathematics, but there are many, and we probably have now to reconsider many things based on that. But that's also important, and I will speak a little bit about it tomorrow, not with too much mathematics, for the fact that if you have a motor disorder, eventually, it may be due to difficulty in combining these geometries. Difficile. Okay. Now, I will go more quickly about this. There are also very interesting things about manipulation of geometry by the brain. For instance, you know that in the retina, the world is coded in a spherical manner. But on the superior colliculus here, this kind of internal retina in the brain, which is an image of the visual world, space is coded not in a spherical manner. It's coded in log polar coordinates. The space is transformed. And we were wondering why. Why did evolution go through this apparent complexity? And we have now published and also tested this, that probably this is because this here, which is the superior colliculus, which controls saccadic eye movements and many other movements in our body, to obtain this geometry already prepares the motor command. So it's an intermediary transformation between the sensory space and the motor space, which allows to be more efficient and quick. Very elegant. Simplex. Not complex, not simple. Simplex transformation. And we have tried to implement it in the robot. Another trick, which is in the same line, very important for rehabilitation. I will speak about that again tomorrow for the children. Anticipation. If I want to go around here like this, I don't go first with my feet. Sorry. We have now shown that when you go around an obstacle or you generate locomotor trajectory, the eyes go first. So I first look the head and the body. So once more, we find a top-down control of the muscle machinery. So that's what we call a cognitive control of the motor. And we have documented that in many papers. You see somebody walking, we measure the eye movements in many trajectories. This is seen from above, the trajectory of somebody doing this complex path. Each of the little lines here is a direction of gaze. And each red dot is where gaze crosses the ground. And you see here, for instance, that gaze is in advance. So actually, I guide my locomotion with the eyes. And this is probably because this trajectory is controlled by the brain in these internal geometries, etc., etc. And I will come to the simulating brain in a moment. That is important. I will say that tomorrow again, because eventually some so-called locomotor deficits, I turn to you, are actually deficits in the guidance of the locomotion. And what has to be rehabilitated is not the muscles. It is eventually this guiding in children or adults or in old, aging people like me. We have to think about it together. And we have done experiments also on this, using these technologies. Very difficult now to measure this thing very light. And also we have now applied this in Pisa on a robot called Sabian in a recent European project, where Sabian is actually using this principle. And once more, this is a way to discuss between us, and also we have now also studied the relation between the feet and the body, important also for cerebral palsy in children, etc. When we also have, I just mentioned that quickly, we also now, to study these things, we have collaboration in French projects between physiologists, people in computer graphics, models, and robotics. So interdisciplinary, because we all need each other, and also the clinicians for studying the pathology, which is what I do. Now, all this suggests that actually our brain is not, as I mentioned earlier, just a sensory motor transformer. It is a simulator. And evolution, therefore, has given us, in addition to these sensory motor systems, even with some clever anticipatory mechanism, a second mode, which allows us to simulate action without execution in internal circuits. And I will speak about that now. Of course, one very recent beautiful discovery made by Giacomo Rizzolatti in Parma, which is probably one of the greatest discoveries in the neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, in the last few years, and actually he received the Brain Prize, I think, for that recently, is the mirror neuron system. The fact that if I do this, some neurons in my frontal cortex here are activated, and everybody thought these neurons were pre-motor. But they did the experiment on the monkey, and as you know, the monkey was taking a cacahuète, so you could hear brrrt, brrrt. But then probably the experimenter was hungry and he took the cacahuète and he heard in the monkey brain, brrrt, brrrt. So that was the discovery. It's admirable. You know, you have to think about it. You have to say, oh, something strange is there. So they discovered that actually these neurons are not premotor only, they actually code the act. And this is very important finding because it is the final break of all dissociation between perception and action. We cannot study now anymore in labs or whatever, dissociate perception and action. Perception is a simulated action, which I wrote a number of years ago, but Giacomo and his group made the first real demonstration, and this is from Julie Grèze in France, who worked and showed that this also existed in man. One attributes to the system many properties, maybe a little bit too much, but, and I know this is recorded, but it is a fundamental discovery, very important. But the brain is more than simulator. The brain is an emulator of reality. Simulation means that you actually can simulate what happens in the world, like in the mirror neuron system. But our brain can, in addition to that, find new solutions, vicariousness, but also simplexity at a higher level, by creating new combinations, like a dream or hallucinations. And I like to read for you this sentence from my friend and master, Rodolfo Linas, and I would like to encourage the students here to read his book, Eye of the Vortex, From Neurons to Self. Beautiful book. The closed system hypothesis argues that the brain is a primarily self-activating system. In the thalamocortical system, sensory input, it's just my computer is. In the thalamocortical system, sensory inputs from the external world only gain significance via pre-existing functional disposition of the brain at that moment. Such a self-activating system is capable of emulating reality even in the absence of input from such reality as occurs in dream. Our brain does not need the world. I have dreams every night, and I have nightmares every night. Everything is bad, but everything is real. And I am completely disconnected from the world. We know that this occurs because we have because of basal ganglia thalamocortical loops, of course, in which we can play all this, but also because we have what we call internal models, and we have internal models of the senses and the biomechanical properties of our body parts, of Newton laws, of the body as a whole. Let me check the time. Okay. How long do you want me to talk? 10 minutes? 10, 15? Is it okay?
Okay. 15.
Can bear with me?
15.
15. Very generous. So we have, this is a complex diagram, but it says that for senses, otoliths, vision, we have internal models of the biomechanical properties of the senses and of the external worlds. So our brain does not only take the information, it compares the information with predictions, Bayesian modeling, etc., of on these models. And with Francesco Laconiti and Joe McIntyre, we've made these experiments in space. we have asked somebody, and this was a discovery of Laconity, to catch a ball. So, see, my hand doesn't move. Look, my brain does not wait for the bottle to touch my hand to produce the force. It doesn't do this. In a child, 1-year-old, does this. Look, see? Because 150 milliseconds before the touch, the brain has produced exactly the force necessary. And we have supposed that this is because the brain has internal models of the effect of gravity on the world, on the objects. And we have actually made the experiment in the space shuttle. See, we are in space here. There's a ball which falls, and we have shown that in space, where gravity is compensated by the centrifugal force, so objects fall at constant velocity. They do not fall according to Newton's law. And we've shown that even in that case, there is anticipation. So these are very deep programs, which eventually disappear after 1 or 2 years in space. So we have in our brain neuronal circuits which simulate this. And we know that in addition to that, we have in our brain a model of the whole body, so-called body scheme, known by the neurologist for many years. And we have now shown that there is a crucial area in the brain for the production of this internal model of the body, and it happens to be where the vestibular system projects. So the vestibular system is not only for posture, it is also a basic reference frame for construction of the unity of the person. And any disorder of the vestibular system will induce disaggregation of the self. Je me tourne vers le psychiatre. And actually it's all this area here which is involved in the relation of body together with space. And we have now from Olaf Blanke in Lausanne very interesting results which show that all this area of the brain is indeed the area where the unity of our body is made, and lesions there produce these very well known from neuropsychology illusions, autoscopy, out-of-body experience, etc., which were things already described by Penfield many years ago in Montreal. He said this is an area of the brain involved in awareness of body scheme and spatial relationships. So simplex principles, making internal models of the plants, making internal models of the whole body, so that you can simulate on these internal, like what roboticians do, action before you produce the action. We also know, and that is, I will end up by that there is a bit more, there is another principle which is implemented in the brain, modularity, space. Actually, we speak about space as if it was a unique thing. In fact, we have many spaces. We have the body space, which I just mentioned, the body scheme, which is one particular space, requiring probably specific operation in the brain. But we also know that we have different networks in our brain for different spaces. This was known from neurology, grasping space, instrumental grasping space, near distance action space, like this, environmental space, or if I try to remember where the train station is in Torino, for instance. And our friends have shown in Germany that if I point with this laser beam to 70 centimeters or to 2 meters, it is not the same area, the same networks in my brain involved. So we have different networks in our brain for different spaces. This is probably simplex principle because you probably need, we think, different transformation geometries to deal with different action spaces. But at the same time, it makes things more quickly. At the same time, there is a problem of the switching between these spaces. And our theory, which I will develop a bit more tomorrow morning in the hospital, is that a number of psychiatric deficits in many psychiatric disorders are due to the capacity to deal with these different spaces and switch from one to another. We also have different cognitive strategies. You can remember your path from the entrance to here by your memory of what you've done, sequential memory. This is what women like to do, but you could also remember, have a map, and this would allow you in Torino to go back to a previous place. Route egocentric topokinesthetic or survey topographic memory. And we know that these involve different networks also. So we have a great modularity in our relation between action space, all these simplifying principles, and the general problem of dealing with action in these different spaces. C'est pas simple. I will skip that. We also have, and I will end up by this, a very interesting lateralization. You know, we have a left brain and a right brain. We know the left brain is more involved in details, language, sequential description. The right brain more in geographic, global, and even imagination. Neuropsychologists say is the creative brain. And we have shown that in navigation tasks, such as navigating in a virtual world, we have a lateralization in hippocampus. So the left hippocampus being involved in sequential memory of what we do, and like describing verbally, this is the relation with the verbal linguistic description of the itinerary, and the right brain being more involved in the allocentric cartographic memory. So it is also probably division of work, simplest. And every time, then we have a new problem, which is, of course, bringing these things together. And this is a demonstration we made of this in fMRI. I had put these two slides, which I go over for Professor Strata, because he is interested in cerebellum, and we also have this asymmetry. But I will go very quick now, and I will actually finish here, unless you have questions about memory. And I would like to thank you now, unless you have questions. Thank you.